to talk to you all about, so let's get her done. We talked about partial reinforcement, we've talked about continuous reinforcement, we've talked about extinguishing behavior, spontaneous recovery, but we have not talked about what a reinforcer is. A reinforcer, well, first of all, punishers and reinforcers, we classify them as either being a positive or a negative. There's positive reinforcers, there's positive punishers. There's negative reinforcers, there's negative punishers. Now, we're classifying them as psychology behaviors, okay? We are not letting our belief system and our morality figure in when you're classifying them as a reinforcer or a punisher, or whether it's positive or negative. You've got to keep that in mind. Now, if I have a 2 and a plus sign and another 2, what am I going to do with those two numbers? Add them. Okay. So, with whether it's a reinforcer or a punisher, if it's positive, you're going to add something. You're going to give something, okay? And the reverse, if something is taken away, it's going to be a negative. Doesn't matter whether it's a punisher or a reinforcer. If you give something, it's going to be a positive. If you take it away, it's going to be a negative. Now, a reinforcer is an event or stimuli that increases the frequency of a behavior. It increases the likelihood that behavior is going to happen again. Okay? In this class, I have said very few absolutes, but I am going to give you 3 absolutes right now. Water's hard, water's wet, rocks are hard. Reinforcers never decrease frequency of behavior. Reinforcers never, 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 never decrease the frequency of a behavior. Therefore, if we are talking about a reinforcer, whether it's a positive or a negative, there is going to be an increase in the frequency of behavior or something given to make sure that behavior continues. Okay? So, a positive reinforcer is given after the target behavior has been exhibited. All right? If you came in one day and at 12:15 I said, everybody who is in your seat right this minute, I'm going to give 25 extra points because you're here on time and you're in your seat. What's going to happen?
He's going to encourage us to come again.
Do what?
He's going to encourage us to come again on time.
There is a high likelihood that you will think this could happen again, and so it would increase the possibility of you being on time and in your seat because of I've rewarded it once, and if I keep rewarding it, that behavior is certainly going to increase or happen again. If I am teaching a dog to sit, and I say sit, and I push the little hiney down, and then give it a treat, and I start that, I say sit, and I help them to sit, and I give them a treat, sit, and help them. Pretty soon they sit on their own, and I give them a treat. That's positive reinforcement, because I'm giving them a treat to increase the likelihood that next time I say sit, they'll do it. So that's positive reinforcement. I'm giving them something to encourage that behavior to happen again. Okay, a negative reinforcer. This is where people get confused. A negative reinforcer is when you have some kind of stimuli that the subject hates. It can be pain, it can be aversive, some kind of noxious stimuli that they don't want. And when they perform the behavior that you want them to do, you take away the noxious stimuli. Okay? Now, when I get into a car and I put the key into the ignition and I turn it, different cars do different things. I have a bell and it drives me crazy until I click the shoulder harness. Now some cars have buzzers, some have all kinds of things. But when I first got the car and I put the ignition and the key in the ignition and the ding, I go ahead and put on the harness. Shut that noise off. But you know something? Now, before I even start the car, I go ahead and put the harness on. So it has taught me to put that harness on. And I did that to avoid hearing that irritating bell. So when you click the harness, the bell goes off. The harness is the target behavior, and the bell is the noxious stimuli. Let's say we've got a family that is super rich. I mean, money's coming out of every orifice of their body, okay? They have a really, 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 really nice house, and they have a music system piped into that house that is unbelievable. It's in every room, and it is top of the list everywhere. It's fantastic music place. The teenage daughter gets in trouble and is grounded. She comes downstairs, and mom says, well, since you're going to be here for a little while, why don't you clean up your room? The health department's about ready to come in and condemn it. Yeah, I'll get around to it. Mom's tired of dealing with it. She knows the daughter hates classical music. Absolutely detests classical music. So what does she do? She goes to that sound system. She puts on classical music. The girl can't get away from it because it's in every room. She comes running and says, Mama, turn that stuff off. I can't stand it. It's driving me nuts. And she says, I'll turn it off when you clean up your room. She runs up and starts cleaning up her room. She does a half-baked job. Comes down and says, I cleaned it up. No, you didn't. You just stirred it around. She said, please turn the music off. I'll turn it off when you clean up your room. So, she goes up and cleans up her room. The music's turned off. That's negative reinforcement. Because as soon as the behavior was done, the noxious stimuli was taken away. Okay? Everybody with me on those two? Speaking of ignitions, another example of a positive reinforcement is putting the key in the ignition and turning it. Why do we do that in a car?
Start.
And you have learned that starts it. That's positive reinforcement. Once you put that key in there and turn it, you're expecting that engine to come on. That's because it has happened over and over again. Therefore, that is positive reinforcement. Just like walking up to a faucet, we're washing our hands like crazy now. You walk up to a faucet and you turn the handle there. You're expecting water to come out. That's positive reinforcement. Okay, so we've got reinforcers now. That's something you give or take away something to increase a behavior. That's reinforcers. A punisher you're going to do something to decrease a frequency of a behavior. You are going to use something to make that behavior go away or to be less frequent. Okay? Now, you have a 16-year-old boy. This boy has just passed his driver's test. He goes to his dad and he says, "Dad, I passed my driver's test." And he says, "Son, I'm so proud of you." And he said, "Dad, I appreciate that. And really, I've kind of asked a girl out tonight and I'd like to impress her, so could I use the car and take her out tonight?" And he said, "Well, son, I'm proud of you and you have done well. I'll let you use the car if you promise me you'll be in by midnight." "Oh, Dad, that's not a problem at all. I will be here at midnight." Boy comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning. The next day, Dad says, "Son, I thought you were going to be here at midnight." "Well, Dad, I'm so sorry. I got tied up with some friends and such, and I'm sorry, I didn't make it." "Okay. Well, I tell you what, so that you'll think about it a little bit more next time, I want you to go out, I want you to rake the yard and take care of all the leaves in the yard. I want you to clean out the garage, and I want you to wash and wax the car." Now, he is giving him chores to decrease the likelihood that he'll break curfew again. Okay? He's giving him something. He's giving him chores. Okay? The next week he says, "Dad, she said she'd go out with me again." And he said, "Well, son, I'm glad. That's good." He said, "Can I use the car again?" And he said, "Well, son, last time you kind of broke your word to me, and I wasn't happy that you came in at midnight at 2 o'clock. He said, "You think you've learned your lesson?" "Oh, yeah, Dad, I've learned it. I'll be here. I will be here at 12 o'clock. "Okay, son, you can have the car." Comes in at 2 o'clock in the morning. Next morning, he gets up. Dad says, "Son, you came in at 2 o'clock. "I'm sorry, Dad, I didn't mean to. Time just got away from me." "Okay, well, I'm going to give you a lot of time to think about that. I'm going to take away the keys to the car for a month. And you're not going to be able to use the car for a month." Well, now he has taken away the privilege of driving. That's a negative punisher. He wants to decrease the behavior of coming in late. So the first time he gave him chores, that didn't help. So this time he's taking away the privilege of driving. A month passes. "Dad, she said she'd go out with me again. Can I use the car?" He said, "I don't know, son. Think you can keep a promise?" "Yes, Dad, I've learned my lesson. I am so sorry. I will be here at midnight." "You're sure?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, you can use the car." Kid comes in at 2 o'clock. Dad's waiting for him this time. When he comes in the house, Dad grabs him by the shirt, brings him like this, and starts beating him. And I mean, he beats him to a pulp. The kid has to go to the hospital because it's such a bad beating. Now, is that positive reinforcement? Negative reinforcement? Positive punishment? Or negative punishment? You say it's negative punishment. Okay, what did he take away?
You beat him and put him in the hospital.
So wouldn't that be negative reinforcement?
No, it's not negative
That'd be
reinforcement because
positive punishment.
what is it that you're trying to increase?
Oh, okay.
would be positive.
You don't want him to
Do what?
it again.
Positive punishment. Now, what was your question?
I said negative because he ended up in the hospital, but now I see where you're going.
See, that's what I'm saying. Don't let your personal opinions, your morals, your beliefs get you in trouble here. We're talking strictly about classifying a behavior, not the results of the behavior here in that respect. Here, he gave him a beating. When you give something, that's positive. When you want to decrease a behavior, that's a punisher. So, therefore, it's a positive punisher. When I had gone to school, had gone to college, and my best friend and I lost track of each other for many years. And I went back home one day, one weekend, and I ran into her, and we exchanged, oh, what have you been doing? What have you been doing? And such. And so we decided that the next day we'd have lunch together. She came by and she picked me up, and in the back seat was her little boy. Yeah, I guess he was close to 4, if not at least 4. And we had a nice lunch, and on the way back she said, I really need to pick up 1 or 2 things for supper tonight. I don't want to have to drive all the way back to town. Do you mind if we stop off at the grocery store? I run right in and pick things up and then run back out. Be less than 5 to 10 minutes, I promise. No problem. So we go to the store, and she said, if you don't mind staying with Brant, that's her little boy, that'll make it a lot quicker. I said, that'll be great, I'll get to know him. He's in the back seat. So she gets out of the car, and she starts going into the store, and he's watching her. And she gets out of sight. He reaches from the back seat to the front seat, grabs my skin and pinches me, goes, "Nyeh." And I said, oh, please, Brant, don't do that, that hurts. And I said, if you do that again, I'm gonna pinch you back twice as hard. He looked at me and he grinned. I reached over, I grabbed a hunk of skin, I pinched the fire out of that little kid. And he goes, ow, that hurt. I said, darned right it did. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punisher, negative punisher. Positive punisher. I gave him a pinch to keep him from pinching me again. Now, the rest of that story, he looked at me, he put his teeth on my forearm like that, and I looked at him and I said, I bite 3 times as hard. And he goes, and we have been good friends ever since then. We reached a little agreement right then, the way things were going to be. When he was about 10 or 11, we used to go to the lake every weekend, and I'd give him a wedgie on the boat, give him a wedgie, and I'd take him and I'd throw him out the boat, and he'd get so mad, and he'd just slap that water and come back in. Stop that. I said, okay. Again. That guy's about 6'4" now. When we go to the lake, I don't get anywhere near a boat. Because revenge is best served cold, and that water is not something I want to feel right now. So, punishers decrease behavior. Punishers decrease frequency of behavior. Reinforcers increase frequency of behavior. Well, we got a couple of terms to get through, and one of them is called acquisition. Acquisition That's just the initial stage of learning. That's when you're first starting to catch on. It's the initial stage of learning, that's all it is. The next one, generalization. Generalization is when you learn something and you apply it too broadly. Discrimination is the opposite of generalization. Generalization, you apply what you've learned too broadly. Discrimination is when you apply it specifically to the event or the stimuli. Okay. I go to pick up this cup. I don't know that there's a yellow jacket on the back of it. It runs around and stings me. Oh man, that hurt. And as I'm thinking about how much this hurt, I see a bug take off, it's flying. I know that that bug flies, it stung me, it hurts. So I guess any bug that flies can hurt me. So I'm going to avoid all bugs that fly. I'm not going to get around the ladybug. Moths can have all the space they want. Butterflies don't have to worry about me trying to catch them. If it's the bug and if it flies, it can hurt me. That's generalization. If I eat at a restaurant and that restaurant is part of a chain, I get sick at that restaurant, food poisoning, I say, well, obviously, I don't need to eat at any restaurant of that chain anywhere in the United States. Now, the restaurants in the other states have nothing to do with me getting sick at this restaurant, but I have applied what I've learned to all of them. And so I'm going to not go to any of them. That's generalization. Discrimination is applying what you've learned specifically to that stimulus. Okay? Now, I go to pick up this cup. A yellow jacket stings me. I see it starting to take off. That is a flying insect. It's got a stinger. It's got yellow and black stripes. Looks like a wasp. Think that I'll avoid that in the future. Now, I am applying that that type of wasp can hurt me. I'm not going to be worried about ladybugs. I'm not going to be worried about butterflies. And until I learn about hornets and other stinging insects, I'm not going to worry about them. But I am going to avoid yellow jackets. That's discrimination. Now, if I eat at a restaurant and I get ill and food poisoning, instead of blaming every restaurant in the United States for that and thinking every one of them could hurt me, I'll say, I'm just going to avoid that one restaurant. That's discrimination. Okay? Next, learned helplessness. This is when a person is taught they are not able to do something when in fact they are. Now, it's not normally done maliciously, but let's say that a guy has a stroke. He's not making the progress in rehab that he should be making, and so the team said, we're going to step up a little bit of, working him. And so one of the things they decided to do is to put his water almost out of his reach, but just enough that if he does this, he can get it, take a drink. So here he's working his arm, he's working his fingers, he's doing more than he has been doing. His cup's there. His family walks in when he's going, and they say, oh, those nurses are so insensitive. They are so negligent. I can't believe they do something like that. Here, baby, we got it for you. You just take all the liquid you want, because I know that you can't pick up that cup. And now they have just set back his rehab because they're teaching him he was not able to pick up that cup. One day my mother, watching TV, and she got up, went to the bathroom. She didn't come back. She didn't come back. Pretty soon I got up and I knocked on the door and said, Mama, are you all right? Yeah. Is there a problem? Well, I can't pull up my pants. And I said, may I come in? And she said, yes. And I said, why can't you pull up your pants? She goes, I don't know. And I said, have you tried? She goes, no. And I said, why don't you do this? I said, why don't you lean over and put one hand on one side of your pants and the other hand on the other side of your pants, and as you stand up, pull them up. Okay. So she did that, no problem, went right back to the TV room. I called up her caregiver, and I said, when Mama goes to the bathroom, what's the procedure? What do y'all do? What do you do when she goes there? And she goes, oh, well, I help her to the bathroom. I walk with her, make sure that she's steady. She goes in. When she's finished, she tells me. I come in and I pull up her pants for her, and I walk her to the TV room. I said, do me a favor and don't pull up her pants anymore for her. I said, I want her to stay as independent as long as possible. And right now, she's convinced she can't pull those up. I said, she's quite able of doing it. Well, she had learned to be helpless. I've told you about the dogs that I've had. One we have right now is named Susie. And when she was born, she was a cute little old ball of fur. And when she got older, she was a little terror. And I mean, she'd run everywhere and she could jump and such. Well, her two great-grandparents, named Gigi and Josh, as they got older, they got some arthritis and such. And so they'd come to the couch. They couldn't jump up, but they'd kind of whine, and we'd pick them up and put them on the couch. Susie's watching this. So she comes up to the couch and she whines. And my husband picks her up and puts her on the couch. I said, don't do that. He said, oh, he said, there's no problem, there's no big deal. I said, don't do that. Well, it didn't take long for her to think she was not able to jump up on the couch anymore. And we would watch her, we've got cameras all over the house, and we would watch her when we were gone, and she'd jump up on the couch, no problem. But when we were around, she couldn't do it. And he said, can you believe that? She's jumping up on the couch. I said, sure she is. And he said, why? Why didn't she do that when we're home? I said, because you taught her she's not able to. And he said, well, how can we fix that? And I said, quit picking her up. I said, pretty soon she'll want to get up there bad enough and she'll jump up on her own and she'll stop being helpless. But see, he taught her that she was not able to jump up on the couch. That's learned helplessness. Then we've got taste aversion learning. Taste aversion learning is when you eat something and you have a bad experience with it, and so you decide you don't want to eat it anymore because it makes you sick just thinking about it. When I was in the 6th grade, Campbell's Soup came out with a product that was absolutely awesome. It was frozen potato soup. And you would take that soup, put it in a saucepan with a little bit of milk, warm it up. That was the best potato soup you ever tasted in your life. It was fantastic. Well, my mother knew how much I liked that soup, so she always kept it stocked up in the freezer. That summer of the 6th grade, was one of those summers where we had multiple triple-digit heat days. Not the heat index, the heat days. And I've been out playing, and I got hungry, so I decided to come in, and Mother was out running errands, so I looked in the refrigerator, and there wasn't much there except bologna, and I'm just not a bologna fan. So I looked in the cupboard, and we had some peanut butter and jelly, but that didn't seem like that would do it for me either. And I looked in the freezer, and there were those cans of soup. I said, yes, that stuff's good. And so right after I opened up the can, I thought, wait a minute, hot soup on 100+ degree day? That doesn't sound like that's a good idea. Potato soup popsicles. So I took out a spoon and I started dipping out the soup, and I would eat it. And first it didn't taste exactly right, but I thought that's just because it's frozen. And after a little while I found a white kind of pellet, and I thought, well, maybe that's the flavor stuff, you know, it melts, no problem. I got about halfway down on the can and I saw something green. And I said, now I know something green should not be in this potato soup. I turned the can around and I'd been eating oyster chowder. My stomach already started rumbling. It was not feeling good at all. So with the incredible common sense and intelligence that I had, I went outside to get some fresh air to see if that would make me feel better. 100-degree weather, already feeling sick, oyster chowder in my stomach. It didn't take long before I started throwing up like crazy. I threw up all afternoon, all evening, way until the early hours. Next day I felt horrible. To this day, I cannot stand oysters. I don't like them baked, I don't like them fried, I don't like them boiled, I don't like them poached, I don't like them raw, I don't like them in salads, I don't like them in stews, I don't like them in stuffing. There is no way that you can serve an oyster to me that I will like it. When I talk about oysters, I start getting that feeling inside of my throat that feels like about ready to throw up again. And that's what taste aversion is. I had a bad experience with oysters, and I started throwing up, and now I can't stand the thought of eating oysters again. That's taste aversion. Observational learning. This is where you learn something from watching somebody do it. The behavior is modeled, okay? It's also called vicarious learning. Now, certainly the best example is just talking about kids. Where do they get most of their learning? From watching their parents. Now, you know, you can tell a kid all day not to smoke, but if you're puffing away, you know, don't smoke, it's too expensive. Don't smoke, it's bad for your health. Don't smoke, it's a nasty habit. It doesn't matter, they see you smoking, there's a very, very good chance that they will try it at least for a while. Well, they also watch their parents, and their parents are setting the standard for what's normal in a family. So, if the father treats the mother with respect, if he treats her and has a loving, nurturing environment, then that communicates to the kids that's a way a husband, a man, is supposed to treat the wife, the mother. If the husband comes home and he beats her and he berates her and he calls her all kinds of names, then that is normal for them, and that sets the norm for them on how their home is supposed to be when they grow up. And so if they see dad beating mom, that's normal, and so the woman expects that's part of what the mother is supposed to endure, and the boys see that and say, okay, that's my role, I'm supposed to beat the mom. And so vicarious learning, observational learning, vicarious learning, it is a very powerful type of learning. Now, when I got Gigi, little Bashan, she was a little bitty tiny thing, and finally she got big enough to go up and down the steps in our house. I thought, she is so intelligent, I'm going to get a doggy door. And that way she can let herself in and out whenever she wants. Got a doggy door, got it installed. Took her downstairs, showed her the doggy door, and I said, okay, Gigi, this is the doggy door, this is yours, this is what you're supposed to do. And I pushed her through the doggy door. Opened up the door, came back, pushed her back through. She was not impressed with my teaching techniques. And so I got down on all fours and I stuck my head through the doggy door and I said, see, this is what you're supposed to do, see, in and out. That didn't work either. I tried several things and none of them were working. So I got basically a book, Doggy Doors for Idiots. And I read up and I found out how do you teach a dog with the doggy door. Works like a charm. 6 months later, we got Josh, another little white bundle of fur. And he and Gigi were the best of friends. They would go romping through that house, they would chase each other, they just had the best time. Well, Josh got big enough to go down the steps. One day, I hear them coming. And here comes Gigi going down the steps, hitting full throttle. Josh was right behind him. She went through that doggy door, and he's right behind her. He goes, where did she go? She comes back through the door, arf, and then goes back to the door like, hey, we're still playing, you gotta come out this way. And he's looking. She comes back through the door and she goes, arf. So he looks, he goes to the door. It was his from then on. Never ever had another bit of problems with that door. I didn't have to teach him a thing. He watched her. 2 tries, he got it. He was in and out that door from then on. That's observational learning. Shaping, that's learning a step at a time. So if I was going to teach a dog how to shake hands, first I would teach them how to sit. Sit, treat, sit, treat. Then after they learn how to sit, I would say shake, and I'd pick up the paw and I'd shake it. And shake, and pick up the paw and shake it and give them treats. Pretty soon, the dog would kind of take a little bit of the weight off of the foot so you could shake it. Well, that's the second step. And so every step is a little closer to the desired behavior. That's successive approximations. Systematic desensitization, created by a man called Joseph Wolpe, W-O-L-P-E. It is very commonly used by behavioralists and cognitive behavioralists. It is extremely successful with people with phobias and anxieties. They come in and they say, I'm really, really scared of such and such. So the therapist will say, okay, and they will start with teaching this person relaxation techniques. And so they'll learn how to calm themselves when they start feeling anxiety and tension come up. When they get really proficient at it, the next thing that happens is the therapist will say, I want you to make a list, 1 to 10, with 1 being the thing that causes you the least amount of anxiety about your fear, and 10 being the most. Let's say it's flying, okay? So the therapist looks at this list, and number 1 thing, the lowest thing that causes anxiety is the word flying, okay? So the client comes in, and you say, okay, we're gonna start working on getting rid of this anxiety. I'm gonna say the word, but you don't have to feel anxious. You don't have to feel panicky or anything, because the word has no power over you. Fear has no power over you. You are in charge of the fear. The fear is not in charge of you. And there's nothing in this room that can hurt you. Okay? Flying. And they go, no. Remember, you know how to relax. Start using your relaxation technique. And remember, you are in charge, not the fear. And so you start working through it like that, and you keep saying fear, and they keep working on it and de-escalating the fear until you can say fear, and they'll go, well, then you move on to the next level. It might be a picture of a plane. You show them a picture and they go, oh. You say, now you used to act like that when we say flying. The fear is not in charge of you. You are in charge of the fear. So, use your relaxation technique. Just remember, there's nothing here that can hurt you. You go through all 10 steps like that. The 9th step might be that the therapist flies with the client someplace, and the 10th one is the person flying on their own. Okay? So you just take gradual steps, more and more toward the biggest part of the fear. But as you go along, you're desensitizing yourself. Okay? I told you last time that Watson was not my favorite therapist, and he's not. Watson, to me, was unethical. He had a lot of things that I didn't agree with. His son said that he would not hug or show any appreciation for the kids unless it was used as a reinforcement. He's the one that brought behavioralism to the United States, but he worked at a college, and as he was working there and they were doing some experiments and such, he got involved with a student named Rayner, and they started working very close to the point that he dumped his wife and married the student. Back then, things were a lot different. The college would not tolerate that, and so they fired him. He ended up the last years of his life out of the field of psychology and working as a marketer. But Watson and Rayner came up with one of the most famous experiments in psychology. It's called the Little Albert experiment. Watson wanted to know if a fear could be taught. Can you teach somebody to be afraid of something? And he wanted to know that, and so he got a little 9-month-old baby boy, introduced him into an environment. Little boy, very happy in this environment. He started introducing things like stuffed animals and different things that the boy did not react to at all, even a burning newspaper. Boy had no fear about those things. Well, then he introduced a laboratory rat. The laboratory rat wasn't a restaurant rat. They weren't worried about the rat biting the boy or anything. They introduced the rat. The child was very fascinated with the rat, and he, got acclimated to it. And then Watson and Rayner, whenever the child would move toward the rat, they would be behind the boy, and they had a metal bar, and they would hit that bar with a hammer and scare the child. The child would start crying and be terrified. They would not soothe him. They would not help him in any way. He'd finally settle down, and he'd look at the rat again. He'd start moving toward the rat, and they'd scare him again. They kept this up and kept this up to the point that soon when the boy saw the rat, he would start whimpering. He would start crying. They said, "This is fantastic. I wonder what would happen if we continue the experiment." So they kept it up. We talked about generalization a minute ago. Well, this is one of the things that also came out of the experiment. They found that by continuing the experiment, little Albert, that's the name they gave him, he became scared of anything with fur. He became scared of kittens, rabbits, fur coats, Santa Claus, beards, anything like that. Well, Mom found out about what was going on, and she withdrew him from the experiment. But looking over the notes and such, there's no indication Watson and Rayner ever were planning on deprogramming him. So he went through life, what life he had, with this fear that they gave him. Now, the bad news is, all indications is the little boy died at 6 years of age. He had a condition called hydrocephalus, which is water on the brain. I don't think there's any indication that the experiment had anything to do with that. But one of the things we're taught when we do experiments is do no harm. They harmed that boy. And that was unethical. It was unethical not telling Mom what all was involved with the experiment. There were a lot of things that were really marginal on ethics about this experiment. And so that's another reason that I'm not really hot to trot on Watson. Skinner, we talked about him being involved with operant conditioning. He was the one that learned so much about positive reinforcements. Now, with positive reinforcement, you do a behavior and you immediately get a reward. Well, if I'm not mistaken, we started out with a pigeon's chamber. And when they would give it a stimulus and it would hit the key, food would drop. And it would get food, and so it really got excited about that. So it learned to peck this key when it got the correct stimulus. Well, he moved into a bigger box, constructed a more complex box, which is this one. But again, all of this was meant to teach more and more about operant conditioning and reinforcements. The last thing about this chapter is called behavior modification. All that is just using these basic principles of learning that we've been talking about to reduce or eliminate an undesirable behavior. That's the end of Unit 2. Okay? I should be able, I think that the third unit test is just over sensation, perception, and learning. If it is, I'll open it up. If it's not, then I'll let you know through announcement. The last part that I'd like to get to at least a little bit today is the third unit. Of course, I'm not gonna be able to finish it, but I'd like to be able to at least give you as much as I can out of it. We are not going to talk about the first part of the chapter, which is daydreaming, which is interpreting dreams. I want to talk with you a little bit about alcoholism and drug addiction. In talking about alcohol and drug addiction, just about anything that you say about one really applies to the other, because all alcoholism is an addiction where the drug of choice is alcohol. Alcoholism has been around for thousands of years. Substance abuse, thousands of years. Substance dependency, thousands of years. But in 1955, the American Medical Association designated alcoholism as a primary disease. Now, this is big, because what that says is alcoholism has their own set of symptoms, their own course of progression, its own designated treatment, and its own prognosis. Also, what it says is the disease, that it is a disease and not just a lack of willpower. Now, you would not say that a person who's diabetic, that they, if they really, really wanted to, they could metabolize sugar. Well, you know, diabetes isn't caused by a lack of willpower. Well, if I had another day, I could actually prove, I think I could prove to you the whole thing, but I will make a dent in it today. I do not believe that alcoholism is caused by a lack of willpower. Now, the question is then, is alcoholism caused by nature or by nurture? In 1940, and this is an incredible experiment, in 1940, two researchers set out to prove alcoholism is learned. Now, the way they did this, they went to Sweden. Sweden has an incredible documentation for medical history. They can basically tell you how many aspirin that you have taken throughout your life. Very invasive, but for research, it's fantastic. They went there and they conducted an experiment for 40 years. Long experiment. Now what they did, first of all, they located the subjects through the medical records. They did not set up this scenario. They found the subjects in this scenario. So what we got here is we have people where biological parents who are alcoholic. Okay? And you have biological parents who are not alcoholic. What they found in their research for subjects were children in a foster home who were being raised by alcoholic foster parents. This was not done on purpose. This was done, this is just researching and finding out the situation. They also found children living in foster homes whose the parents were not alcoholic. So, what they found was, here are some students, some children whose biological parents were alcoholic being raised by foster parents who were not alcoholic. And they have the children of biological parents who were not alcoholic being raised by foster parents who were alcoholic. They wanted to see if children learn to be alcoholics. So, it's a beautifully set up experiment. Like I said, it lasted for 40 years, and what they found was that the children whose parents were alcoholics, but being raised in a non-alcoholic environment, had 4 times the rate of alcoholism than the general population. The children whose biological parents were non-alcoholic, and this is what they really wanted to see, because if they are in an environment, they don't have the alcoholic gene, and they're raised in an environment of alcoholism, this would truly tell you if alcoholism is learned. Beautiful experiment. After 40 years, the children whose parents were biological parents were non-alcoholic, and they were raised in an alcoholic environment, 0%. This was stunning. Absolutely stunning. And so, this gives the opening for really challenging if alcoholism is learned or if it is inherited. Well, after that experiment, 5 years later, Yale ran an experiment. 1,000 people were interviewed that were in rehab, and they were asked, are one or more of your parents alcoholics? 87% said yes, which is right there with what this one said. It was replicated in 1992 on the other side of the country at UCLA. 100,000 people interviewed in rehabs. Are one or more of your parents alcoholics? 86.9% said yes. If you have one alcoholic or addicted parent, your risk factor goes up tremendously for addiction yourself. It can put you in a 85 percentile type of risk. That does not mean you are destined to be an addict or an alcoholic, but you are in a high-risk group, and it is probably well worth your while to take some very, very cautious behavior and decide early if you are, if you want to risk the problem. It's almost like having a gun and you put 5 bullets in a 6-bullet cylinder, spin it, and put it to your head and say, do I feel lucky? Because the risk factor is so high, especially if you have 2 parents. If both parents are alcoholics or addicts, the percentile goes into the 90s. But again, that does not mean you are destined. It means that you have a high propensity to develop the problem. Well, there are 2 stages of becoming an alcoholic or an addict, and then I won't even be able to give you the neural pathway discussion. That also contributes to it. But what I will do is give you the stage 1, which is the attraction stage, and I think I've just about got enough time to do that. This is your brain. This is the hypothalamus. Okay? The hypothalamus is the pleasure center of the brain. If you will remember correctly, it releases endorphins. Endorphins, they are nature's morphine. Also, you can call them nature's opiates. What does that do? They decrease pain, they decrease tension, and they increase the mood. Well, one of the endorphins that the hypothalamus releases is called THIQ. Now, let's say you've got two people. One, we'll say, has a genetic predisposition for alcoholism, and the other one has no genetic predisposition. They've had a hard day, so they decide to go to happy hour after work. The one that has no genetic predisposition says, I think I'm going to have a vodka and tonic. Says, that sounds good. I think I'll have a vodka and tonic also. The problem is, when a person does not have a genetic predisposition, that's it. But for some reason, when a person has a genetic predisposition, the hypothalamus releases THIQ, which is an endorphin, nature's morphine, and therefore, not only are they getting the vodka and tonic, they're getting that THIQ, and they're going to start feeling less pain, less tension, and an increased mood. Therefore, it's setting up an attraction because of negative reinforcement. They're feeling cruddy. They take vodka and tonic and they don't feel cruddy anymore. That's negative reinforcement. That sets up the attraction, so the next time they have a hard day, they want to come back and get another drink that's going to make them feel good. Well, it says, well, it's time for me to go. I'm ready to go. I'm going to head out. Come on, let's just have one more for the road. All right, just one more. So he gets another vodka, another tonic. That's it. Now he gets another vodka, another tonic, another shot of THIQ from the brain. That means he's even going to feel less pain, less tension, and his mood's going to increase more. And he's going to say, I feel so much better. And this one's going to say, yeah, it was a good drink. This is why people cannot understand how alcoholics and addicts have such an attraction to their drug, because they're getting more than just this. Their body is giving them something that can make them feel a lot better, and therefore ends up wanting it again. Now, a lot of people will say, well, I feel really good about that because I don't like vodka, so I'm not going to worry about it. Well, fact is, this occurs when you use marijuana, when you use opiates, sedatives, benzodiazepines, amphetamines, and inhalants. Every one of them will give you a shot of THIQ if you have that genetic predisposition. Now, one other thing about THIQ, which stands for tetrahydroisoquinoline. They did experiments on rats. Okay, they had rats in their cages, put water in there, and rats lapped it up. okay? They put rats in cages with alcohol. Rats avoided it to the point of almost dehydrating themselves. So what they do, give them a choice. You can have the water or the alcohol, but they gave the rats a THIQ. They avoided the water completely and drank nothing but the alcohol. So we do know it sets up a desire, it sets up an affinity for wanting more of the substance. I'd love to tell you the rest of the story. Can't, but I will tell you this. I am really, really gonna miss you guys.